What up, folks? This is Harmsy, back in the soundbox, and in this video, I'm changing up the format a little. I'm not established yet, so I can afford to do that. Hit it! Alrighty, so to start things off, using a small nail in the center of the end cap and a divot in the center of the first disc, I lined them up so I could get the holes where I needed them. After clamping both together on the table, I marked out the locations with a pencil, and after some deliberation, I decided to drill at first with a bit much smaller than what I needed, so I could widen it out later. The first hole was a bit off-center, but not too bad. On to the next one. Even worse. I should have started over at this point, but instead I kept going. The third hole was just about perfect, sadly. After using the first disc to guide the drilling of a few others, I decided to start over with the drilling and use a better stencil. I pulled up Blender, copied the model, and made some quick changes, then it was off to the printer. I had some trouble getting the stencil out with the razor blade, so I sharpened up a nearby putty knife and used that to much better effect. Cleaning the stuff and things off of the edges of my stencil was a breeze, and then I went ahead and used it with some nails to make divots where I was going to make my second drilling attempt. On the table, you can see a 3/8 inch drill bit, the same size as the threaded rod, and I'm using this tiny drill bit hiding behind it. All this shaky cam that you see here is proof that I need a better mounting for my camera. I'll work on that later. Also, this disc really didn't want to let go of my drill bit. Now it was time to use those tiny holes to mark every single disc. My wrist was sore after, but I got it done. I decided to use the power drill to let my hand rest, but even with hearing protection it was almost too much for me to handle. It was getting the job done though, and that razor plane was good for removing tear out. The constant clamping and unclamping was doing a number on my already hurting wrist, so I stopped using them after a while. That turned out to be a good decision because the process went faster without the clamps. Down to the last two, and done. I needed to rest my hand for a couple days after that. When it was time to get back to work, I used one of my Unibits to widen out the holes on the first piece to their final dimensions. After getting most of the way through, I switched to a spade bit to finish off the hole. Then it was time to start stacking. I used a smaller drill bit and a piece of small threaded rod I found laying around to line up about half of the pieces, and then I drilled the empty hole out to size using the long 3/8 inch drill bit. It was tough doing it by hand, and I had to bring the bit out several times to clear it out so I could keep going, but it got the job done and I needed the exercise. I did the same process 2 more times, using the 3/8 threaded rod in the open holes to keep it all straight. As I progressed, I had less range to turn the brace, so the ratchet became very useful despite being very annoying, even with the hearing protection. Hyperacusis rears its ugly head. After the third hole, I was done for the night. My arms were in pain. I swept up and went to bed. Here's a possible idea for a future project, by the way. Bought this thing online, don't remember when. The next day, I got to work on the other half of the stack. I got lazy this time around and used the power drill because my arms were sore, and while it did make things go faster, it also went a little off course on one of the holes. If I'd done it the hard way with the hand brace, it probably would have come out straighter. Either way, now I had to combine the 2 stacks. I struggled pushing the discs from the second half down for a while and nearly finished when it got stuck on these last 2. I tapped them with a small hammer, I tapped the threaded rods, and I got a bigger hammer to tap with that. No luck. Finally, I got the drill out and tightened the chuck on the threaded rods. Then I tightened the chuck again because I'm bad at drills. This was a much better way to get things moved to where I needed them, and only dealing with the friction from 2 threaded rods, I could push those last 2 varmints all the way down. Then I slapped the stack against the floor a few times, trying to close up any gaps. After mutilating some of my less useful 3D prints and cutting off some of the excess threaded rod, I was able to find and drill the center on the far end, and it was finally time to start sanding it. I tried heaving the stack up against the belt sander and quickly wore myself out for the night. Next, I tried mounting the stack where it needed to go and turning it against a piece of sticky sandpaper, but it was just too uneven, and I couldn't move it fast enough even after I added another bushing in the slider, cut down the smooth rod, and moved the sandpaper to the bottom of the flap. I need to add a depth screw to this thing later, but that's not the most pressing thing right now. Finally, I tried bringing the belt sander to the stack and let it rip. The friction was too much for that little plastic end piece, and the thing came off with a noisy thud. I was fed up at that point, so I cleaned up all the dust I'd just made. By the way, I would recommend vacuuming yourself off. It feels really good. Well, unfortunately, because of that mishap, I'm going to have to end the video here. Some things didn't quite work out the way I hoped they would. I didn't give myself enough depth here for one, and the coming to a point thing that I was trying to do so that I could use the rod to turn the big drum thing wasn't working. The drum thing wasn't even turning the rod. So I'm going to have to rethink that, as well as add some more depth and maybe come up with some other way to rotate it. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and go over my footage and write up my voiceover script, get that recorded, get this thing out as soon as possible. And until next time, I've got some cleanup to do because, yeah. Oh, wait, I already used that joke. Oh well.